Well, thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's program, Front Row Center, the best celebrity photos from a Boston photographer's 30-year career. Author and photographer Allan Dines will share his presentation based on his recent book, Front Row Center, How I Met Everybody. For almost 30 years, Allan Dines has photographed hundreds of celebrities and some of the most iconic venues in Boston and surrounding areas. Legends from the world of music, movies, televisions, sports, and more were captured by Allan's camera, and almost every photo has a story to go with it. Allan shares many of these photos and stories in his book, Front Row Center. So Allan is a Boston-based photographer who documents the history and lives of those in his community. A part of the city scene for nearly 3 decades, Allan has amassed a treasure trove of original works of Boston and its activities, from political events to timeless moments in art, culture, and history. And tonight, of course, we're focused on celebrity and the photos that he shared in his new book, Front Row Center, How I Met Everybody. So all 40 of us or so, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Allan for joining us here tonight. And Allan, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Robert, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Allan Dines, and I have been, as of the 18th of this month, a 30-year veteran of photography in the Boston and surrounding area. And truly the Boston area. I've done over 2,500 shoots in the Boston area. That's well over 500,000 images. So before we get started, I want to share a disclaimer with you. Let's see if we can, we should be. There we go. Yeah, my memory stinks. So I have a second disclaimer as well. My memory stinks. That's really not true, but I say that because if you look at the image and what's behind me, you're looking at somewhere around 150 of my more than 300 passes to shows and venues and concerts around the area. And out of all of those, I think a total of 10 shoots have been outside of Massachusetts. So to say I'm mass-centric is for real. I want to get into the celebrities right away. If you want to know, how I got my first camera and that stuff, the book is a great introduction. But I'm going to start with my first job. I was hired by the Jewish Advocate after having volunteered at a private event and them seeing a photo and running it. It was happenstance. I was an amateur photographer. I was 32 years old, and I had no idea that was going to be a career. But I went out and volunteered to do the eyeball at the Park Plaza. A photo was used of a celebrity from that evening, and very quickly, within 3 months, they were calling me not as a staff member, but as a freelancer that they could get very cheap to go out to an event here or there and supply them. They knew that I was excited about it. It was not a lot of money, but what I got to do in the literally first 3 months of being with the Advocate was amazing to me. Here's the first shot. First assignment I went out for them was 1992. This is Hillary Clinton stumping for Bill in Boston a couple of weeks before he was to come out, and a few weeks prior to George H.W. Bush coming out. So this was election year. Freelance event again. They used one photo. I was very happy. And a couple of weeks later, they called me again and they sent me out to, this was a rally in Faneuil Hall. You will also notice to the right, you'll see Mayor Ray Flynn, Joe Kennedy, as well as Paul Tsongas. And this was just fabulous. Not on staff, I had other job as well. And then this was one of the first passes I ever received. This was for the trip of the then President George H.W. Bush coming to Boston on Air Force One. So this pass got me to Logan to the side terminal where Air Force One came in, and I was on the tarmac when he was getting off the plane. I had never had my equipment searched before, but let me tell you, they went through every canister of film that I had with me. They took everything apart. and then handed it back to put together. But it was worth it. This was an experience seeing Air Force One pulling in that not too many people have. Here's another shot as he came down. And the Jewish Advocate was, I was there for a couple of years. I did very, very small jobs for them, but the best part about it was the publisher allowed me to use the name of the Advocate and go out on my own. So if I saw something happening in the city that I was interested in, I would ask them, would it be okay to use the name of the Jewish Advocate? And they said yes. And I got into many things like that. The one I'm going to share with you right now is the last time Cheers, the cast from Cheers, was in town to do some filming at the close of the show. They actually used Boston police and firemen in the shooting of these scenes at the Bull and Finch, or Cheers as it's known on TV. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see Kelsey Grammer. He's actually tethered. There's a guy behind him holding on real tight, as was Kelsey. He had a pretty firm grip on the window there. And then as part of the scene down at the bottom, you'll see to the left George Ratzenberger, Cliff Clavin, and Ted Danson. Another shoot that I went on for them was at the North Shore Music Theater. And this was Joan Rivers. Long time ago. She was fabulous. Absolutely loved the show. And she was just pleasant as can be when we went to do the photos. And then one of my favorites while I was working at the Jewish Advocate again was Julia Child. Over the years, I actually got to work with her probably about 4 or 5 times and had the fabulous opportunity of sitting in her kitchen in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is now the entire kitchen was taken apart and was put together again at the Smithsonian. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. And then as far as breaks are concerned, I guess I made my own breaks. The House of Blues in Cambridge was about to open. And I asked again, would it be okay if I tried to get to the opening? I thought that would be a really hard ticket, and it was, but I did get on it. They had 2 nights of opening, and I was there the second night. This is one of the shots from the night. These 2 guys were in the movie The Blues Brothers, which kind of was a preemptive setup for the club. And on the left, you have Donald Duck Dunn, no longer alive, and Steve Cropper. Also, the name, of course, is Dan Aykroyd as Elwood or Jake Elwood. And behind him to the left, a little out of focus there, is Matt Guitar Murphy. And the reason I'm showing you the House of Blues is because that night there really kind of put me on a path of music and direction. I had so much fun at the House of Blues that night and loved the energy and the staff so much that I decided that I was going to try to get there, whether it was to see shows, to photograph shows, in some way, shape, or form. As a freelancer, it was something that I really wanted to do, and it didn't take a long time for it to happen. So the opening was in November, and the next June, so that's not a long time later, I had contacted WZLX, who was hosting their first be-in. It was an annual be-in. They only had 2 of them, but this was at the Hatch Memorial Shell along the Charles River in Boston. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's also where they do the 4th of July. It's a very iconic venue, and certainly the stages. And this is my pass from that show. The cool part about this for me is that this was my first all access pass. I mean, really all access. There was no place that I was not permitted to go, including the green rooms, inside the hatch, the back of the hatch, on top of the hatch. And I took full advantage of that and really enjoyed it. So this is the first shot that I've ever taken of a crowd from a stage. There were no, the guys weren't setting up equipment at the time. They were between sets. I walked to the front. I just wanted to take a photo, and people got up and they started waving. So I understood that we were going to have a moment, and I waved to the crowd, like a really big wave. And I got the response that you see here. It was really wonderful. You're looking at somewhere around, I think 10,000 people, they say, fit on the the green in front of the shell. And that was a lot of fun. It also was a time that really worked out for me because this was one of the groups that played. It was the House of Blues All Stars, and I'll get back into it. But it was because of this show and the House of Blues All Stars that I ended up at the House of Blues as their photographer. Less than a year after I had kind of planted it in my brain that that's something I wanted to do. I'll show you another band from that night, and then I'll tell you about the house. So Roger McGuinn was there earlier in the day, and then in the evening you had the band. And I took that opportunity to go on stage again, and maybe I pushed my luck a little too far because you could see her on the right, Rick Danko from the original The Band lineup was not pleased with me, and I left really soon after that. And to the left on drums, you see another original member, Levon Helm, and on guitar, you see Jim Weeder, as is written there. So now getting back to the House of Blues, at that event, I met a gentleman who said, his name was Nigel. He said, if you would send me the photos, I'd really appreciate it. I said, I have a better idea. I'm going to bring the photos to you next week because I knew that if I brought them to him, we'd be able to have a conversation. And that's exactly what I did. The following week, I brought the photos on a Tuesday, and he saw my photos and he hired me pretty much on the spot to shoot later in the week. Again, with all access at the House of Blues, the second annual Stevie Ray Vaughan tribute. And you can see the date, August 22, 93. It was November of 92 that I had first stepped foot in the house. So it was pretty amazing to be there as a photographer. And things went really well there. I ended up shooting at the House of Blues for over 3 years, hundreds and hundreds of shows there. Floorboards shaking. If you had ever been to the House of Blues, it was the venue was food downstairs, and the music venue was upstairs. And on a good night, the floorboards would bounce. It was just wonderful. So aside from the blues, the House of Blues, as it does now, also had other performers and big names, very big names. This was a great show by Clarence Clemens from Bruce Springsteen's band. He filled half the stage, and the sound was wonderful. The band Boston played there in this incarnation. It's not all the original members, but to the left, all the way to the left, you do see Brad Delp, and in the back is Tom Scholes, the founding member of the band. This is up in the green room where I spent many, many hours and had lots of wonderful shots. So Boston was one of my favorite bands growing up. So this was pretty surreal. And I took the opportunity to get my favorite shot of Brad Delp. Unfortunately, most of you know, if you know the band and the history, Brad committed suicide a few years ago. I'm not sure of the date. Very sad, and certainly one of the best voices in music. On any given night, you never knew who was going to show up. This is a group that consists, if you look at the musical history, it's about 80 years of music history. To the left, you have Chris Layton from Double Trouble. He was one of the 3 members in Stevie Ray Vaughan's band. Beside him, you have Eric Burden of the Animals. Seated, you have 3-time, I think, not R&B. I forget his, forget what he won, but lots of wins, and in Blues Hall of Fame, it's Little Milton. And to the right is Robbie Krieger of the Doors. And that was a wonderful set too. That was a lot of music, wonderful set. And again, this is a green room photo. And at the House of Blues, right beside the green room, up on that second level was the soundboard. And I had opportunity to shoot there as well. Sometimes you didn't know what was going to happen. This is John Entwistle of The Who was there to support Zach Starkey, who was playing. And Zach Starkey, for those that don't know, is Ringo's star son. And they had a very wonderful relationship. And he had played earlier in the night, probably at the Boston Garden, and was there in support. Excuse me. Sunday brunch was always a wonderful thing there. And here you have R&B megastar Lou Rawls. He did a couple of shows there and wowed them. His voice was like silk, as you all know. Sometimes you had weird combinations too. This is Al Unser, the race car driver, and Brad Whitford of Aerosmith. This was a shot that ran in the newspaper, and very often with a lot of my clients, not only House of Blues, but radio stations, and even some of the nonprofits, they were bringing me in specifically because I had a great relationship with both the Globe and the Herald, as well as every other paper in town. But on a regular basis, my photos would run either in the Globe, in the names and faces column, or in the Herald and Inside Track. And anytime those ran in the paper, it guaranteed my phone ringing because somebody said, oh, you know, I need to get him to get that in the paper. I didn't have that kind of power, but I sure had the shots that would do it. Here's another one. This was from a rap party for With Honors, which was filmed at, a lot of it was filmed at Harvard University. And this is Brendan Fraser of Mummy fame doing his best mummy pose. He's lying down, again, up in the green room at the House of Blues on one of the couches. And then this is a really favorite shot of mine from the House of Blues because Otis Rush was the musician that was playing there that evening. He was the famous blues guy, and sitting beside him getting his autograph is Susan Tedeschi, who at the time had only been in music a few years. She was really just starting out, and I got to photograph her numerous times in those early years when she was starting. And I did have this one in the book because I just thought it was wonderful where she ended up and that she was sitting beside this legend. So I did work with her over the years. This was a show for WBOS. This was at the Hatchell too. This is in one of the dressing rooms with Bruce Hornsby. And that was a wonderful show. And as you all know, she kept growing and now has the Tedeschi Trucks Band. But prior to that, this is a pass to a show she did at the Orpheum. And I will tell you, she's wonderful. She's always been kind to the people around her, me included. She never didn't return a phone call when I wanted to see a show, and I've heard from other people. She's always been so receptive and very, you know, had warm feelings. She had a really good start here, and I'm glad I was able to capture her. I have her, you know, many other shows as well, but this is one of my favorites too. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to change a little bit and talk to you. You know, there's stories. People always ask me, what's the worst thing that happened, the best thing, the funniest? So I thought we would cover some of those. This is under the headline of amazing. At the large concerts, like Kiss concerts, oldie shows, things like that, there's always a lot of musicians, but they're usually not around together. They're staggered. They come, they go. But this was a very special night at Mamakin. Mamakin was down on Lansdowne Street, and it was started by Aerosmith and the Lions Group. And I'm going to read a little bit from the book to give you a taste of the way a night would start. So I'm going to look down, but the title of this chapter is Do What the Boss Says. Launched by Aerosmith and the Lions Group on December 23rd, 1994, and named after one of the band's earlier hit songs, Mamakin. Mamakin was one of Boston's hottest clubs by the time I was contracted to shoot a VIP party on October 22, 1995. So this is only 3 years after I started as a photographer, and I was working for most of the radio stations and many of the nightclubs at this point. Excuse me. It was to be a star-studded event featuring a performance by the band Neurotic Outsiders, a supergroup that featured Billy Idol, Duff McKagan and Matt Sorum of Guns N' Roses, John Taylor of Duran Duran, and Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols. Among those turning out for the event were Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, Tom Hamilton, all of Aerosmith, Dan Aykroyd, who was in town for finishing up Celtic Pride, and Led Zeppelin's frontman, Robert Plant. That's just a crazy lineup, just saying those names. I arrived at the club and made my way past the line waiting to get in, gave my name to security, and was checked off the list. Once inside, I stored my bag and was soon greeted by the GM. He gave me basic timing for the sound check and showtime, and then he gave me a very specific instruction. I'll never forget it. Keep all your equipment off and don't shoot anything until I tell you to. I certainly have been told in the past when I could or couldn't take photographs involving celebrities, but this was the only time I was ever told to keep my equipment off completely and to keep my lens cap on. Not my place to argue, so I did what I was told. Shortly after that, the doors open and the VIPs start to fill the room. I'm standing along one wall when I look to my left and I see Robert Plant enter the club with a friend and start heading in my direction. I then see Steven Tyler crossing from the right with the GM to greet them. I'm getting extremely antsy because I can see the moment about to happen, but still not having been given the okay to power up. Yikes. Tyler and Plant meet directly in front of me, greet each other. Then Tyler turns around, puts his arm around Plant, and says to me, "Take a shot." Of course. I reach up to turn on my flash. I reach down to turn on the camera and the battery and go to take off the lens cap, but not fast enough. Tyler looks at me and says, "A real pro," with a chuckle, and turns back to his conversation. I was then told it was okay to start shooting. And here is the first shot I've got of Steven Tyler and Robert Plant. Yeah, it's a good one. On the left, you can tell it's Steven Tyler's hair, and the right is Robert Plant. Not the shot that I wanted. But I did work around a little bit. Here's something, they're over at the bar. That's a little bit better. And then here's a fun one of Robert. So the night is early, and Robert and Steven separate from each other, and I decide to follow Steven Tyler, and he made his way right over to Dan Aykroyd. Now, Dan had already met me numerous times at the House of Blues at a couple of events, as well as a board of directors meeting. So I had a great relationship with him, and even though Steven laughed at me, this shot, it's a fun shot, and the smiles are really genuine. I was then told that Joe Perry of Aerosmith had just pulled up and was asked to grab him. So here he is at the front of the club on his way in signing autographs. Then I made my way back in towards the excuse me, and we do go to black and white because a lot of this was to be processed by me so that it was ready for press within a day. This is Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses, and you see his guitar there. This is just before they started playing. And here you have Steve Jones of oh my gosh, I always forget. Steve Jones of Sex Pistols and John Taylor of Duran Duran. So this is on stage in the main venue. There were probably about 5 people in the whole place, and I literally was standing 5-6 feet away from them, and you don't have that opportunity very often. I love this photo because if you look to the very far right in the back, it almost looks like a floating head. You see that Billy Idol had shown up, and he was about to get on stage and join them. So he comes over. Well, here's a shot of Steve. Then Billy came up, and they start talking about the songs that they're going to do. They didn't play together often. They didn't see each other a lot, and there wasn't a lot of together time. So these warm-ups the rehearsals here were really important. And this is absolutely my favorite shot of over 30 years of photography. I've shot everybody, as I said, and there is no shot that I come back to more than this one of Billy Idol. I hope you like this one as well. And here's pretty much the complete band doing their sound check and rehearsal, I guess. And you can see the Guns N' Roses being represented here. once the warm-ups were done, they kind of broke out, and before they took off, I was able to get them together. So this is a great shot of John Taylor, Matt, Billy Idol, Tom Hamilton had now joined the club as well from Aerosmith, and Duff McKagan. And I have this next shot because it kind of gives you the era, because there was still smoking inside at that point. That's not happening anymore. This is a great shot. Billy was awesome. I think most people have heard that he is pretty wonderful, and he was on all night long. He had a blast. He was giving me poses left and right, and just really enjoying himself. And he made the night fun for me too. Tyler was not performing that night, and he was having fun. This was, part owner in the club. It was a great night. This is his first wife, Teresa Barrick. And then before the evening ended, well, they went and did the show, and we're not doing any of those. But I finally got this group together, and it is probably the shot that other than the Billy, that I love more than anything. Just the amount of talent here and getting them all together was just so much fun. I'll leave that up for a second. And then I think what we're going to do is I jump around a bit. You see this background. I kind of think that way too. We're going to change gears right now, and I'm going to tell you about one of the weirdest shoots that I ever did. That last one was one of the best, amazing shoots. This was fun. It was Jewel, and this is in 2007, and it was a performance that she was doing for Verizon Yellow Pages. I assume that she was in town to do a show as well. This she was doing in conjunction with Verizon and Magic. But it wasn't in studio. It wasn't in a venue. This was done on the Green Line MBTA leaving out of Boston College. Absolutely the weirdest. So weird, in fact, that it was covered by the press. Here you have Joyce Cole-Haywick. I'm sure many of you know her from in the past on WBZ radio. And this is Candy O'Terry. She was DJ at the time at Magic. She was also doing the Exceptional Women's Lunch, which was a program that I shot many times. And here she is introducing Jewel, who is behind that banner that you see. One of the funniest entrances that I ever had to shoot. Very, very tight left to right, people climbing on top of each other to get photographs. And that doesn't include the guests that were there as well. And I'll show you a shot of them in a second. But Jewel was chuckling about this too. I don't know that she had ever played on an MBTA car either. So here she is. Yeah, she was smiling pretty much the whole time. Beautiful voice, great to look at. She was a lot of fun, and she played all the way into Boston. I'll just show you a couple more, and then this is what the reverse looked like. They went all the way back to the back of the second car. They had the music piped in, but you could see the way people were just trying to get a view. And we got to South Station, and she was escorted off the train, and we went into a private party up there that was being hosted by the radio station. And the money shot for the radio station was this one with Don Kelly was the station manager, Jewel, and Candy O'Terry. All right, now I want to talk about the coolest shoot that I ever did. And yeah, there's a little bit of a pun in there, looking at the ice and the hockey. This was the NHL All-Star Game in 1996. I was hired by a PR firm, excuse me, to work with the very famous, iconic painter, Peter Max, who had done the poster for the All-Star Game. He's done many of these. He's done the Olympics and you'll see some of his art coming up, and you'll know him just by the colors and the palette that he uses. So I had 3 days to work with him, and the first time I was meeting him was going to be at this Pinnacle event at the World Trade Center. So he had a booth there, and I'm going to read to you about that in a moment. And I'm going to leave this photo up for now. So you could see behind his head, that is the poster that he provided for the NHL All-Star Game. And I'm just going to read a bit from this chapter. Unlike the other one was don't shoot until I tell you to, this one is shoot until I say stop, the very opposite of it. So I'll start. We all first met, that means me, Peter, his entourage, Thursday night at the Fantasy Experience being held at the World Trade Center on the waterfront. Peter had a huge convention space set up with the banner reading Art of the Coolest Game over the front. The space was filled from floor to ceiling with framed artwork of various sizes depicting different aspects of hockey. He also carried some recognizable pieces such as the Statue of Liberty, Donald Duck, and Snow White, which may be some of the things you remember. There were also painted and signed hockey sticks, pucks, and really amazing goalie masks for sale. To complete the vibe, some of the staff dressed as referees. I arrived early, as I usually did, to let my client know I was on site, store my gear, and check things out. I started taking setup shots of the booth and all the great pieces when I spotted Peter coming down the hall with his group. He looked very pleased as he approached the booth and saw the result of the hard work of his staff. After he looked around a while, I was introduced to him as his photographer, which was really awesome. And I remember thinking that he reminded me of my grandfather. Same kind of look, mustaches. Moments later, he was pulled away for some photos. This is one of them. And video op with press, as well as videographers from the NHL. I'm standing off to the side, getting shots of the interviews and waiting for Peter to head over to the table at the front of the booth filled with the posters he had designed for the All-Star Game. When he's done, he thanks the crew and is being directed to the signing table, but stops and motions to me to come over. He pulls me aside and he says, I want you to do something for me. I said, sure, Peter. What do you need? He says, I want you to get on a chair about 4 or 5 feet in front of me and shoot down over the top of me and the posters while I'm signing. And what you're seeing here is he had signed some posters earlier. Those were one thing, and then he re-signed and doodled on another, and I'll explain that. And he adds, just keep shooting while I'm signing the posters. I said, sure, and then he adds, and just keep shooting until I say stop. Since I typically would only take about half a dozen photos from one place, I asked about how many shots he wanted. His answer was a bit puzzling because he responded, I don't really care about the shots. I just want you to fire off the flash about every 10 seconds. Then, when he saw the confusion on my face, he added with a smile, just keep firing it off and watch what happens. I said, sure, Peter, you're the boss. As the signing began, there were a few people already there waiting to get posters or autographs. They were informed that the poster alone was one price, but if they wanted Peter to sign and custom embellish them, again, there would be an additional charge. And I think it was about $100 more if he doodled on them. I have about a dozen shots left on the roll at the time, so I fire those off. And as the people leave with their signed posters, more take their place. Peter is signing, embellishing, talking, laughing, and every 10 seconds or so, I'm firing off my flash. No film anymore, just the flash. Attracted by all the commotion at our booth, people came from all directions. I would guess that because of the request, Peter sold an additional 50 to 100 posters, with most of them being of the signed and embellished variety. When it was done, I waited until we had a quiet moment, went over to him and said, that was brilliant. He just smiled, as he would, and I do have a vague memory that he patted me on the back as well. And it truly was amazing to watch him. He was a master salesman, and we still had more shooting to do so the next day. So when I left there on my way out, I still was wearing that laminate from Pinnacle, which gave me access anywhere again. And I had the big camera with me. So as I'm walking out, I saw two greats of hockey off to the side preparing to do whatever it was they were doing, and took the opportunity. I'm from Montreal and love hockey, to go over. And it was Mark Messier and the great one himself, Wayne Gretzky. It was a great way to end the evening. But it wasn't the end of the hockey that I was doing. So the next day, there was a celebrity skate at one of the MDC rinks. I think it might have been in Milton. And it was, again, celebrity driven. Everything around the game was. Here in the locker room, you have Senator John Kerry lacing up. Jason Priestley from 90210. That's an oldie but a goodie. And also from 90210, Jamie Walters. And Jamie actually is from Massachusetts too. Another Mass resident who was skating that night, now very, very famous. Not when I shot this so much, but here's Neil McDonough. And to his right, if you remember Miracle on Ice, 1980 gold medal hockey team, this is the goalie, Mike Ruzioni. Also at this event was Richard Dean Anderson, that you might remember as MacGyver. And he was with Matthew Perry from Friends. And at the end of the skate, Matthew told the PR people that I was working with that he really would like an opportunity to drive a Zamboni. Well, he did. And it started out really nice. We were all at one end, and they kind of gave him the keys, and he didn't want to get off. He took a couple of tours around the ice, and Richard Dean was egging him on, and press was just following him. It was really crazy. Anyhow, Peter left. The next day there was one more event. I still have a poster of his signed and doodled that is a prized possession. And he really was one of the coolest guys I've ever met. Wherever he was, that's where the party was. So now we're going to jump, because we're getting close. I'm going to talk about one of the weirdest, hard, not fun experiences. I had worked at the Palace at Rue 1 in Saugus. Many of you know it's no longer there. But for many years, it was multi-clubs and busy. One of the promotions they had was they brought in a bubble machine, and I was asked to photograph. This is Rick Fox, who played for the Celtics. This was in 1996, and I didn't go back to the Palace again for 4 years. Not that anything happened, just the opportunity never arose. But I started working for a PR firm that was handling the Palace, and they brought me in, and I shot there for a while, and the first shoot did not go so well. It was early on in digital, and I was using my digital camera for one of the first few times that I was feeling comfortable going out with it. And it was to photograph the rapper Nelly. He had done a show in Boston, and the agreement, and very often with the Palace, this is the way it would go. Performers would perform in the city, and then after the show, the after parties would be at the Palace, where they were treated like royalty and had access, exclusive access to the VIP areas and the green rooms. So on this occasion, Nelly had performed and was supposed to have photos done, but they refused photos for most of the time that they were there, which was really not cool, because the contract that they had with the club was that in order for all the benefits, the shot would be taken. So I hadn't had the shot of him, and it was getting late in the night, and my boss, the owner of the club, said, "You got to get a shot of him." So I ended up getting a little sneaky about it, and I just kind of waited around some posts, and eventually Nelly came out. This is up in the VIP area overlooking the dance floor, but I wasn't going to get anywhere close. I had a long lens, so I took this shot, and no sooner had I taken the shot than I was grabbed by my shirt and my collar and was being choked and dragged by a gentleman, and I use that term loosely, who had to be 6'5", 340, giant, massive arms, security for Nelly. And he took exception with me taking the photo, because I guess they had been told that no photos were supposed to be done. And he was dragging me to the front of the club, where I knew I was going to be in serious trouble. I mean, real trouble. And I'm going to back up for 1 second because I was saved, and I included this at the beginning of my book, and nobody has ever asked me about it in all the interviews I've done. I say, and I really want to thank Scott Farmland for literally saving my butt one night at the Palace on Route 1 in Saugus. But nobody's ever asked me about it, but I'm going to share it with you. As I'm being dragged by my camera strap and my shirt to security, to their main security, where I'm sure I was going to have an issue, Scott, who was a big guy, probably about 210 at the time, he jumped on the guy's arm that was pulling me. So at least now I wasn't choking. But this guy was dragging the both of us to the front. As he's doing that, I had the foresight to drop my card, my reader card, out of the camera into my pocket. And when we got to security, there was nothing for them to see. They never saw the photo. The guy that was dragging me was furious that I was able to put something over on him. And for the rest of the night, security was watching me. So much so that it's the first and only time that I asked a club owner to provide security going to my car because I didn't think I was going to make it. Now, that was the first shoot at the Palace, and he promised nothing like that would happen again, and it didn't. And there were a few other really fun shoots that I'll just share real quick. This is Lil Kim when she was at the top of her game. Same thing, they did shows in Boston, came out to the club. This is third place in American Idol, Kimberly Locke, who's having a stellar career. And then somebody I'm sure you all know, Usher. He was wonderful, just the nicest guy, posed for pictures. I love this shot of him. I'm so happy to have it. And now I'm going to get on to my favorite story and the last story, and I think we will have time for some questions as well. I'm going to start by saying Kiss 108 was a phenomenal client for me for 11 years, and then some small stuff afterwards. Every summer I looked forward to and prayed that I would get the Kiss concert. Each Kiss concert had anywhere from 20 to 35 acts of every variety, from small to large, heard of, unheard of, and many first-time acts and people that were just on the rise, that were just starting their careers. And quite frankly, I saw a lot of people that were just starting their careers. What I want to focus on for this story is this one down here. It was Kiss Concert 23, and that was Kiss Concert in 2002. Again, excuse me. Again, it was a stellar lineup, and there were certain standouts. This year happened to be very heavy female driven. In the past, it was probably more male driven, as opposed to 50-50, and the names at this concert were just incredible. This is Alicia Keys. Now think 2002. That's 20 years ago, and she's still. All these performers are still going strong. Some of them are having a resurgence. Avril Lavigne was one of my son's absolute favorite performers at the time. I think he was at the show as well. And start of her career, 22 years later, she just had a couple of songs coming out in the last month or so, as I recall. Michelle Branch did a set, and then you had Celine Dion, as if you haven't had enough already. You had Celine Dion do a set, and again, these 20 years ago, their voices were all stronger, younger, different. Their music was different, but they were all topping the charts at the time. And the next two sets of photos are two women that were my favorite to shoot over 30 years, and they were both on the same at the same show. The first one is Shakira. She had just started. Kiss was very well known to have these performers in like the first, second, third year of their careers as they were building, and she was amazing to watch. She was really hard to watch because or to photograph. I wanted to watch her. She danced, and the way she does her moves were amazing, and the camera absolutely loves her. She did a fair amount of belly dancing as well. And then at one point, this is confetti that was brought down around her, and my favorite shot of her set. And then this next one, she melted my lens, if that's possible. This is Gwen Stefani, and at this show she was with No Doubt. She did perform at Kiss Again solo with the Harajuku Girls, but this was with her band. And there are not many performers that I've seen that work a stage the way Gwen does. I would say Peter Wolf is one of them. David Lee Roth for sure owns the stage like nobody's business, but Gwen is on a par with them. She prowled the stage, she commanded the stage, she connected with the audience. The posing that she hit, the looks that she hit were just a pleasure to photograph. It was, there were some days that just looking through the lens was really magical, and this was one of them. Everything she did just worked. This is one of my favorites from her set. And if that wasn't enough, on the other side, for the males, the big name was Aaron Carter. Aaron is Nick Carter's brother. Nick is well known from the Backstreet Boys, and they were both at this event. And this is after their set. So Aaron came out first, did a couple of numbers. Then Nick came out, and the crowd went nuts. And then when they were done with their set, they presented every year. The Genesis Fund would be the recipient of checks, donations from Kiss 108. They were presented by these two, and then Billy Costa came out and did an interview. And when I tell you that the front of the stage was a crush of girls, I had to be back in order to get this. And this is kind of where this last story picks up, and I'm going to read from this chapter, and this is called It's Good to Have Friends. So my responsibility finished in the front of the stage when this shot was done, and this is where we pick up. I have the shots that I need, and I have other places to be. So I start making my way toward the aisle, and that's when I see this adorable little girl a few rows back staring at the stage and wearing an Aaron Carter t-shirt with the words Aaron written down one arm and Carter written down the other, like fake tattoos, having a real moment, complete with red face and red eyes. Understandable, since she just saw her rock star crush in person. At this point, I started thinking about the older of my young sons, who was 6, and how, I guess he wasn't there, and how he would be if he met one of his heroes. And I decided I just wanted to do something special for her. Now, over the years, I would always have extra Kiss concert tickets, and my brother and I, my brother was my assistant, when we would go up to the very last row of the venue, and we didn't need our tickets once we were in, we would find, a dad with his daughter, a mom with her daughter or son, a couple sitting in the very last row, and we would upgrade them. I think it made me feel better and my brother than it ever did them, but we all had stories about it. So I wanted to do something special. She was adorable. So I followed her as she headed to her seat about 15 rows back to sit with a woman who I would later discover was her Aunt Val, who put her arms around her trying to console her. I went up to the woman, introduced myself, and told her I was working with Kiss 108 and handed her my card. I asked her to send me her address, and I would mail the little girl a photo of Aaron that nobody else in the whole world would have except me and the radio station. She smiled, told me the girl's name was Caroline, and said thank you. With that, I was on my way. I roamed around the venue for another half hour or so until it's time for me to head over to the Strawberries Records and Tapes. That's a little soon, but we'll leave it there. Sorry about that. We'll leave that. Okay, sorry. I roam around the venue for a half hour or so until it's time for me to head over to Strawberries Records and Tapes, where there's a meet and greet with Aaron and Nick, who will gladly sign your newly purchased CD. I get over to the tent, and there had to be at least 200 girls in line between metal barriers holding up their CDs. While I'm standing with Aaron and Nick, and I was talking to them, taking photos and looking around, off to the right and halfway up a set of stairs, I see that same woman with the little girl that I had talked to earlier. I was still feeling her energy when I had an idea to make the day totally unforgettable, as you can see here. A little premature there. I made my way over near where they were standing and reintroduced myself. I looked at the aunt and pointed behind me to where Aaron and Nick were signing and asked, "Would you trust me with your niece?" I knew she understood what I meant, and because she would also be able to see me the whole time from where she was standing, she said yes. I said, "Great, then give me a hand." Since I was on the inside of the barrier, Valerie and I both lifted Caroline over to where I was. I offered her my hand, which she took, and the two of us walked past all the big girls and their CDs. I walked her right up around the table where Aaron and Nick were signing, and I said, "Aaron, do you have a second? I'd like to introduce you to Caroline. Caroline, this is Aaron." She didn't say a word. She couldn't say a word. I'd seen this reaction before from other people, so I just asked Aaron if he would do a photo. He said sure, and with that, he scooped her up in his arms, and I started shooting. And this is when I was going to turn to the photo. He then put her down, but before he could leave, Nick, who had been watching us, wanted in on this and came over to Caroline and asked if he could sign her shirt. Again, she didn't say a word. She just nodded and said yes. Nick then not only signed her shirt, but was happy to pose for this photo. At this point, she must have been in shock, but also all smiles when I say, "Are you ready to go back?" She just nods. I take her hand again and we make a return trip to Aunt Val, past all those other big girls again. Less than a week later, I mailed out some photos to them, and a few days after that, I received letters from both Caroline and Val. But that's not the end of the story, and this is the PS. While doing research for this book and contacting old colleagues to get more info on some of the stories, I contacted both Valerie, who has followed me online, and Caroline to make sure that I got all my facts right. They both confirmed all my details, but also told me the rest of the story. Following the concert, Caroline, as any 9-year-old would do, was telling everyone at school that she met Aaron and Nick Carter and was getting photos to prove it. Of course, kids being kids, nobody believed her and gave her a hard time. They gave her a really hard time. I mean, it is a pretty tall tale to tell. There were only a few days left at school that year when Valerie received my package of prints. Knowing that Caroline was dying for the photos, she overnighted them, and they arrived the night before school was to end for the summer. Talk about timing. Caroline walked into school on the last day of the school year with her proof and was proudly showing the photos to anyone who wanted to see. To say she was queen bee for the day would be an understatement. I'm happy to share that this little 9-year-old girl is now all grown up, plays and writes music, sings in a band, and has some tattoos, real ones this time. She has a wonderful spirit. We've talked a couple of times, works with autistic children, and does music therapy. The three of us have talked and agree that this is one of the favorite stories of our lives. Celebrity driven to boot, but somebody that I met. They agree it's a favorite story of our lives, and that we've all thought about often and will always have as a wonderful shared memory. As I said earlier, it's nice to have friends. With that being the last chapter of the book, I would also like to say thank you. Robert, I'm back with you.
Great. So, Allan, wonderful job as expected.
Thank you.
What a great note to end on. Before we plug your book, let's take a few questions from the audience. So, folks, if you have any questions, please get them into the Q&A box, and I'll relay them to Allan. Allan, the first question comes from Karen. She asks, "Who would you love to photograph that you have not done yet?"
That's a really, really wonderful question. It's not just one person, it's really a whole band. It's the Rolling Stones. I never had the opportunity to photograph the band, but at the same time, I would like to have photographed them years ago, like 20 years ago, and not today. Different thing. But yeah, the Rolling Stones is a band that I would like to have photographed.
So Chachi says,
Chachi,
Chachi, maybe a friend of yours, Alan.
he is.
He says, nice job, Alan. Enjoyed the pics and stories. How do you rate your favorites when you have thousands of pictures? And how many pictures do you have? Maybe it's hundreds of thousands, or what do we think?
Total images, hundreds of thousands, over 500,000 images, and most of them celebrity driven. Even non-celebrity events had celebrities. As an example, I would say half of the 90s was music, the other half was nonprofits. The wellness community, which was Gilda Radner's, the nonprofit that was formed after she died, had a branch in Massachusetts, and Ted Danson was a big supporter. So even in an event that you're not expecting, I had celebrities. So virtually 90% of every role I ever shot had some sort of celebrity. And I appreciate the question from Chachi, who is Beatles expert par excellence and a very dear friend.
Teresa asks, or first she says, that is a great story about Carolyn. And have you had a chance to photograph her now that she is a musician herself?
Not yet, but that sounds like something really fun to do. She's on the Cape. We've talked. She really works a lot, and we haven't even got together. She knows about the book. She's read it. Val actually came to the book launch, which was supremely wonderful. It was so nice to have her there, especially after confirming all the details of the story.
Kathy says, great job. You are very warm and open, and I can see why celebrities would cooperate with you. And I guess let's transition here. Ellen, can you talk briefly about why you wanted to write this book?
COVID. No, that's not really true. I talk about it in the introduction. Part of it is COVID. I had the time, but this is how it started. I've always wanted to write this down. I know that I'm getting older, my memories are getting older, but the worst part is that my thousands and thousands of negatives are all getting older, and they're deteriorating. They've been stored, crushed up in filing cabinets for, some of them for 30 years, through winters and summers, in attics, and I don't have climate control, and was not able to store them, so they're actually breaking down. And I'm grateful the book was in black and white, because some of the images, they were so beat up that the only way I could correct them and digitize them and fix them was by making them black and white and working for hours and hours on them. So it was a little bit out of necessity, meaning I didn't want to lose it. And I feel now, I would lose a lot if anything happened, but this is kind of a written oral history, let's say, of some really great shows and some really fun years. But I certainly have enough material to write a book just on oldies, just on the Kiss concerts alone. I could do a book with 300 celebrities, and that doesn't include all the audience and all the peripheral stuff that I shot. So it was out of necessity. It was about having time. And the funny thing is that I know of at least 3 other people, another one of which is a photographer, that wrote a book during COVID, and a very famous Boston writer, a guy by the name of Larry Katz, who did interviews. He had all his material, and he donated it to a university because he didn't know what to do with it, and it's all been digitized, and that's available now. So I guess it's about preserving history.
Great. And Alan, finally, how would you recommend a viewer, whether they're watching live with us tonight or they're watching the recording on demand, how would you recommend they purchase a copy of your book?
Get in touch with me. Go to my website, allandinesphotography.com. It's spelled out for you there. You can get them on Amazon as well. It's the same price whether it's from me or Amazon, but I will personalize it to you, and there's no difference. Happy to do it.
Great. So Alan, do you have any last words for us before we wrap up?
I do. I want to thank you for all your help, Robert. I'd like to thank the Tewksbury Library for setting this up, and for everyone else that joined to make this fun for me. It would have been really nice to see you folks. It's very surreal sitting here looking at a screen and a camera, but I appreciate your time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Allan. I want to thank the 6 partnering libraries, along with the Friends of the Library and the Corning Library the Corning Foundation. And for those who are watching live, look for that email for me tomorrow with a link to a feedback survey and a link to the recording. So thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again, Allan. Have a good night.
My pleasure.